to do what?
What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Protect Our Queens podcast presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. With me, as always, my brother in Christ, my partner in women's basketball crime, Martin Soares of Basketball Society. What's up, my guy? How are we feeling tonight?
Man, doing all right. You know, I've been recovering from being sick this week.
Yeah.
Anybody who's used to tapping in with us on Tuesday nights, that's why we didn't have a show this week. I've been recovering a little bit, but almost back to 100%. Definitely wanted to get on and tap in. So anybody who's watching live, good to have you here. We're about to get into a lot of conversation about a lot of things going on, including the playoffs. Definitely stick around because we're going to talk. We're really going to unpack playoffs and talk plenty of basketball at the end and talk about these two amazing WNBA playoff matchups that we have coming up. But we got some other stuff to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to get into it. As always, if you don't like women's basketball, this is not the place for you. And make sure you're, following Protect Our Queens on Instagram. We just had our 1-year show last week. Anyone who checked that out, appreciate it. If you haven't seen it, definitely go back and check out some of the gems that we had throughout that episode. But yeah, good to be here. Marcus is going on a cruise tomorrow. He's at his grandma's house. That's why he's in a different spot tonight. So definitely had to tap in tonight.
The ambiance in grandma's basement is nice, man. I gotta say, it feels good. I gotta
change of scenery.
I got a picture of I don't know what back behind me. The lighting's nice. It's a good night.
Artwork.
Little abstract artwork for your interpretation. Yeah. As Martin said, there's a lot to talk about, and we wanted to tap in, obviously, especially with me not being here next week. We won't have a show next week, but there's a lot to talk about. This news cycle this week has been crazy. It's kind of a good thing that we didn't have a show on Tuesday because we would have missed out on the opportunity to talk about a lot of the stuff that's unfolded over the past week or so. But before we get into all that stuff, I did just want to say real quickly, we've kind of referenced Unrivaled a bit on the show the past couple weeks. Since we've last been on the show, we've found out a couple players are going to be joining. Shakira Austin of the Washington Mystics is going to be there. Tiffany Hayes, 6th Player of the Year, she's going to be there. Brittany Sykes, a favorite of Martin Soares, is also going to be out there. I believe Tiffany Hayes was player 23, which means there's only 7 players left to reveal for Unrivaled of the 30. And I'm super pumped. I'm super pumped for Unrivaled. And again, like as Martin said when we talked about Rickea Jackson joining, all hits, no misses so far. There's not one player I've seen field where I'm like, it's been great every step of the way.
I saw them tweet back at someone who was like, what if Asia what if Nafisa and Brianna end up in the finals against each other? And they tweeted back at them like, we're just waiting. Let's wait till we get there. Let's get there first, and then we'll see what we do with that.
Yeah, but nah, man. I mean, I'm pumped for Unrivaled. I'm pumped for just the playoffs. Obviously, we're gonna have a very important conversation in just a second as well. But yeah, as a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and hit the intro and let's get started.
Protect our queens.
No matter what it takes, we must protect our queen.
I mean, I just love playing the game. It's fun.
I'm reacting on what the defender does.
I hit them with a hezzy. After that, they quit.
Yeah, I think I've always just been able to get downhill. So I've sort of prided myself on that.
I know what I'm doing. Like, people can't tell me I'm not doing the right. Like, I've been taught the right way.
All right, so before we jump into this, for all of those who are joining us live, we just want to say that we appreciate you. Please feel free at all times to join the conversation. We're going to have a lot of great conversations tonight. We're going to start off on more of a serious note, certainly the most serious topic we've addressed on the show to date. There's been a lot happening in the world of women's basketball, as we mentioned, and a lot of it has not been necessarily the most positive, the way that maybe a lot of us might be used to. So before we kind of really dive into this and dissect this, we want to play a clip of Alyssa Thomas after the Suns playoff game earlier this week, addressing some of these concerns.
From each tip off to the final whistle,
son have been locked in, professional, and taking care of business. What does it say to the professionality of this team that you've been able to shut out the noise?
Honestly, it's been a lot of nonsense. I think in my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly. And there's no place for it, and we've been professional throughout the whole entire thing, but I've never been called the things that I've been called on social media, and there's no place for it. And basketball is headed in a great direction, but nah, we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names. I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And we come to play basketball for our job, and it's fun, but we don't want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's uncalled for, and something needs to be done, whether it's them checking their fans or this league checking. There's no time for it anymore.
Want to give a special shout out to Noah Dalzell, who's a senior WNBA writer over at SB Nation for the video. So there's a lot to talk about here. I do want to very quickly just read off the statement that the WNBA made a couple days ago regarding this. It says, the WNBA is a competitive league with some of the most elite athletes in the world. While we welcome a growing fan base, the WNBA will not tolerate racist, derogatory, or threatening comments made about players, teams, and anyone affiliated with the league. League security is actively monitoring threat-related activity and will work directly with teams and arenas to take appropriate measures to include involving law enforcement as necessary. This is tough. One of the things I shared with Martin before the shows we were putting it together is there is a component to protect our queens that I think exists off the court that we haven't yet had the opportunity really to dissect, right? We went into this wanting to make sure that this could be a place where fans of women's basketball could come and have a safe space and have conversations about women's basketball. We wanted to also provide a safe space for players on all levels, whether it's players, coaches, media members, trainers, whoever in the space of women's basketball, to come and have a place where they can have their opinions, tell their stories, and talk about women's basketball without being hated upon. That's all the on the court stuff. For me personally, anyway, there is a much more important component of this off the court, which is quite literally, as young Black men, literally protecting the queens that are in the space of women's basketball, players, coaches, trainers, media members, whatever, because it is important that we are doing that. So Martin, just, what are some of your initial reactions to, Alyssa Thomas, to the statement the WNBA made, this entire situation as a whole, just, wherever you want to go with this, go ahead and take it away.
I guess I'm really going back to the origins of this show and some of the things that we did talk about when we kind of started this show, and some of our messaging around real basketball fans versus people who think they love basketball, but they spend their time trashing or downplaying women's basketball. Because I think the conversation is really, the elephant in the room is like the Caitlin Clark fans. And in that clip, Alyssa Thomas referenced that she never has heard or received this kind of racial hate and discourse from Indiana Fever fans in her 11-year career. So Caitlin Clark and not all of her fans, of course, we don't want to generalize because it's a subsection of her fan base that seems to be really loud and proud. And those are the fans. When Alyssa Thomas said Indiana Fever fans, that's really, I think, what she was alluding to, or who she was alluding to. And I go back to, again, when we started this show, which was, as we said, we just celebrated our 1-year show last time we were here last week. So a year ago this time, Caitlin was still in college. She was in her senior year. College season hadn't even started yet. But as we got into episodes where we talked about, obviously we were talking about Iowa and and college teams and stuff. But once the WNBA stuff started coming up, it started to become, I mean, we knew Caitlin could come out. It wasn't solidified until she declared that she would, but just the prospects of Caitlin coming to the WNBA, the conversations that we had and some things that I stressed was that because we started to see some of this coming, because when we would talk about the WNBA and Caitlin Clark and kind of projecting, we would see these Caitlin Clark fans, I guess whatever you want to call them, they would feel so strongly that because they think Caitlin is so great, which she is, but the combination of Caitlin's greatness and them not having a real appreciation or respect for the WNBA turned into this commentary and discourse and stuff that we would see from people where they were just making it seem like Caitlin was going to be the end all be all. The league's been trash and will be trash, and just be happy that Caitlin's coming because she's going to be the only one playing high level basketball. And that was the rhetoric. That was the attitude. And I think, not to bring it back to this, but it's part of the conversation in terms of the race thing. Caitlin and Angel's moment 2 years ago in the national championship, that was significant because to me, that has now trickled over into the WNBA, where if the girl gets poked in the eye during a basketball game, the person who did it to her, and we've seen several instances this season where someone bumps into her or fouls her hard or something, or pokes her in the eye, and all of a sudden there are death threats and people getting followed home and stuff. And that's just the weird, listen, this is sports. Athletes have been getting hate and have been called names and stuff. If you're a high level athlete, you've been getting that your whole career. You're probably used to it since high school. And we get that, but we all can agree that that's where it goes too many steps too far, and it just gets too weird. And it's not fair no one's blaming Caitlin, because it's not even fair to do that. It's not her fault. And it's unfortunate that it's the thing that we have to acknowledge, that it didn't get to this level until the moment with Angel, and until these moments that, and the common denominator is Caitlin. And it's these extremists who are so extreme about their love for this player, and so extreme about their hate or dislike for people who are not like her or whatever, so I'll kind of leave it there and, let you bounce off that. But I take it back to the nature of like, these fans, these like super fans, these extremist fans, just don't really know how to separate like their respect for the game and their love for Caitlin.
So and this is obviously something that's come up a lot. You mentioned it as well. We want to be perfectly clear. We do acknowledge that this is not every single Caitlin Clark or Indiana Fever fan out there that's doing this. We do acknowledge that, right? I would go as far to say even that the people that are doing this aren't actually Caitlin Clark or Indiana Fever fans. They are people who are using their love for Caitlin Clark to Trojan horse and camouflage a bigger issue that they have within themselves, right? When Martin talks about this notion that Caitlin Clark was going to show up to the WNBA and be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and be the best this and the best that, that's a twofold issue. The first thing is it shows their mentality and a lack of not being tapped into the elite level of basketball that has been played in the WNBA for the last almost 30 years. More importantly, it is this notion, this idea that a white girl is going to come into a league that is predominantly Black, that is predominantly filled with members of the LGBTQIA plus community, and quite literally humble them, because that's what her role as a white woman is. And I want to be perfectly clear. Black women in this country have and always will be, until something changes, the most underappreciated and unprotected community in this country. And this is just yet another example of that.
Yeah.
I full-heartedly believe that the WNBA, and specifically Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, has failed its players. When you wait until numerous instances of racism and misogyny, and more specifically misogynoir and homophobia and all of this stuff. Like, we're talking instances upon instances upon instances where a number of players across the league, whether it's Angel Reese, whether it's Kennedy Carter, whether it's Diamond DeShields, whether it's Dejanay Carrington, whether it's even her own teammates like Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell, Nalissa Smith, or Erica Wheeler, when you have all of these different instances of these players being attacked for reasons unrelated to basketball, for reasons unrelated to who they are as people, simply because it's the color of their skin, that's an issue, right? And more importantly, when you wait until after this team has been sent home to issue a statement, when this is an issue that started in May, we're talking 4 months ago, more specifically 4.5 months ago. Season started May 15th. It's September 27th. We got a statement from the WNBA about all this 2 days ago. When you wait 4.5 months to issue a statement about that denounces racism, that denounces homophobia, that denounces misogyny, and all of these other things, when the life flow, the heart and soul of your league is Black women and LGBTQ Black women. When you wait that long, what does that say to your players? What does that say to the coaches and the trainers who might also be in that community? What does that say to the fans who find a sense of identity in themselves by being able to turn on women's basketball games and see players that look like them and sound like them and come from similar backgrounds and have dealt with similar struggles? It's the same when we're talking about the way that the NFL and the NBA treat these players who are accused of domestic violence and domestic abuse and all that stuff. Like, what are you? It's bigger than just what's happening in between the lines. It transcends all of that, right? And so when you have an instance, and again, it's not Caitlin's fault. No one's going to say it's Caitlin's fault, because it's not Caitlin's fault. Caitlin Clark is not a racist. She's not a homophobe. She's not misogynist. She's none of these things. Yeah. If you've only watched 2 years of Caitlin Clark basketball and you've only known her from 2022 to now, you would know that she's none of those things. So this is not an indictment on Caitlin Clark, but to Martin's point, to your point, bro, like, this is, unfortunately, it does coincide with that, right? It does coincide with this notion that there are a lot of people who thought, hey, this white girl who's really good at basketball, and she's about to hit the WNBA, and she's about to take it by storm, and we're going to use her as an opportunity to spew our hate rhetoric and to do things that, to be honest, we don't have the balls to do openly without some type of mask in front of it. And so I'm going to say I'm a Caitlin Clark fan, or I'm an Indiana Fever fan, but in all actuality, I just need a reason to continue to spread hate. I just need a reason to continue to crap on Black women. And here on Protect Our Queens and anywhere, we ain't doing that.
We ain't letting that fly.
We're not doing that. We ain't letting that fly, bro. As a young Black man who has had a multitude of strong Black women in my life who have poured into me time and time again, who are continuing to pour into me time and time again, I can't just sit here and just watch and say, oh, this is sports, because it's not. There's a difference between trolling and racism. There's a difference between trolling and being misogynistic. There's a difference between trolling and being homophobic. And if you're a troll, that's fine. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing necessarily wrong with trolling. Like, there's trolls all over the place. But racism, misogyny, misogynoir, homophobia, that stuff can't fly. And if you're the WNBA, it's a joke that Martin and I have running offline. But, like, know your personnel. Like, know the communities that you're supposed to be protecting. Know the people that you're supposed to be protecting, the people that you're supposed to be setting an example for. So that was really long-winded, but as I said to Martin the other course of the week, like, I couldn't find a way to address this in 90 seconds on a reel. I really wanted to get that out. But again, like, this is one of those moments where, like, as a fan of the WNBA, I'm almost kind of ashamed that it took the league this long to say something about this, that it took the league, we're talking almost a dozen players and numerous instances, like more than 24 instances of players like being physically talk about what happened with Diamond DeShields and her Instagram comments after that hard foul in the last game against Chicago. Talk about what they did with Kennedy Carter after the first flagrant foul. Talk about what they've done to Angel Reese over the last 2 years. This took way too long for the WBA to issue a statement. 4.5 months, that's way too little, and it's way too late, in my opinion.
Yeah, it sucks. It's unfortunate that they even have to deal with it, and it sucks that like the Indiana Fever really, like the league and the Fever, like Alyssa Thomas said, like I think someone else said, like they should really, I don't know what can be done about it, but they should continue to check it because it's there, like it's right in front of our faces, and it should be addressed. It's hard to like again place any particular blame. It's not going to Caitlin. It's not going to the entire area of the Midwest, right? But it's like it's got to be addressed because it's happening and it's worse. Again, it sucks because you don't want to point the finger at Caitlin, but you just have to put two and two together for someone like Alyssa Thomas to say that she's never seen it like this before. Yeah, that is a result of more eyeballs and the growth, but that more eyeballs and more growth shouldn't just automatically mean more racism. And there are more layers to this because there are demographics involved. There's timing involved, the social media component. I've had many conversations with people who wanted to kind of just know, like, why now? Like, why is it so crazy now? And there's a lot of things to point to that have built up to this. I mentioned one of them, the incident with Angel. And I want to take that to something I saw Nick Wright say, which I'm not always crazy about stuff Nick Wright says, but he's been really good on this stuff, I think, and saying really good stuff. But what Nick Wright said was, you've got this boatload of new fans because Caitlin Clark is box office. But unfortunately and inevitably, and the league should have seen this train coming down the tracks like we did, on that bandwagon were folks that weren't fans of basketball, that weren't even actual fans of Caitlin Clark. They were fans of what they thought Caitlin Clark could represent, which was the humbling of Black women. And you've got this cavalcade of open, unabashed racists who try to put a hood of Caitlin Clark fandom on and on social internet, and last night in person tried their best to terrorize her opposition. So I love how he put that, because again, I just think it really goes back to the Angel Reese incident, and like not even incident, just the moment. Once they saw a Black girl who beat her in that game, who was dominating in that game, who beat her in the national championship game, give her one of these and do what Angel Reese has always done. It's not like she just started talking trash that game. That's how she always played basketball. But now these people, fans, and even the media, as Angel put it, has contributed to painting Angel as the villain of the two, because so many people prop up Caitlin to be the great white hope, the hero, the savior, all that. And just like that, Angel was made to be the counter or the opposite. And then she's expected to just embrace it because that's what people, like she said, I'll take it, but it doesn't mean that that's what she wanted. People, like, if you watch and observe Angel Reese, yeah, she's a bully on the court, but she's like a sweetheart off the court. She's trying to be like a cute princess off the court. And maybe that doesn't, maybe for people that's like, I had one of my buddies, we were talking about it today, just had a good conversation about it. He feels like she should stand on the bully side more. She should stand on it more because that's how she plays on the court. That's how she is. That's how she gives it up. Maybe stand on it more off the court and not, you know, kind of play the victim, as some people call it. But I see it the other way, where she literally was a victim, because all she was doing was what she did all year against all of her opponents. It wasn't until she did it against one particular person that somehow this turned into her and some people still don't even understand. They're like, why is Angel, why people still don't understand like what it is, like why is there so much hatred, discourse, feud, conflict, Caitlin, Angel? A lot of people still don't understand it, and you have to like break it down to them, because it's a lot of this is baked into it, and you can't avoid it.
There are two comments in specific that I want to just address before we move on to the next thing. The first thing is from Sean. He says, bro, the problem is that your queens are so screwed up in the heads because it's not just CC fans, it's also their fans that also do it, and stop blaming CC for this. She can't tell them what to do. Not one time did we blame Caitlin Clark for this. We just said that.
No, we're not blaming. She can't possibly get any blame for this.
Yeah. So no one's blaming.
I've even said, and I'll say now, like, I know people want her to say more against it. I think she's doing great with it. The best thing is that she doesn't give off any of that energy, like you said. She doesn't act like she's racist. She doesn't give off any vibes like that. She does nothing to contribute to it, which is amazing. That's one of the good parts about it, is that she doesn't contribute to it. And I like, if she spoke out against it more, that would be great. But I'm not necessarily looking for her to do that specifically. If she does it, great. But like, I'm not really looking at Caitlyn in any of this. It's not her fault at all.
And then the second comment comes from the hand. Someone says, OMG, for real, what about the racism Caitlyn got for the whole season from the black female players and media? So I do want to respond to this, because this is something that you and I talked about offline earlier this week. I think, again, there's two things that are happening. One, I will not sit here and deny that just like there are people who say they are Caitlin Clark fans who are going out and antagonizing other black players for the name of Caitlin Clark, I won't sit here and deny that there aren't incumbent WNBA fans or Angel Reese fans who are masquerading as such to go out and attack Caitlin Clark. I'm not going to sit here and deny that. But what I am going to say, and whether you like the answer or not, it's the only answer that we can give you. We as human beings, we as a society, we can only react to, respond to, and address the things that we see. We can, that's all that we can do, right? I liken it to going to the doctor. If you go to the doctor and you don't tell your doctor what's wrong with you, he or she can't help you. He or she can't properly diagnose you. So am I going to sit here and say that Caitlin Clark has not been receiving death threats or being followed and things of that nature? No, or else the girl wouldn't have personal security following around her everywhere she goes. Obviously, something is happening. But the difference is the stuff that we do see that's targeted towards the black players, it's in your face. You can't deny it. Go on any post, literally just search the name Cheryl Swoops on Twitter. Search the name Angel Reese on Twitter. Search the name Dejanay Carrington on Twitter, and you'll see thousands upon thousands upon thousands of just things and comments that are filled with more vitriolic anger than I've ever seen in my life towards players. None of it having to do with basketball. So we can only address what we see. Now, as for the other part of it, because again, I think there's two parts. I think the second part of it kind of ties in hand with the Caitlyn versus Angel thing, is that there is a large contingent of people who, again, from the moment Caitlin Clark arrived onto the scene in the WNBA, and maybe a little bit before that, anything that wasn't said in favor of Caitlin Clark, specifically any reasonable constructive criticisms, was automatically deemed as hate, jealousy, racism. Automatically. We can start with Cheryl Swoops in February, who the first thing she said was she thought Caitlin Clark would be a good pro. She accidentally portrayed some stats incorrectly. She's been called a hater ever since, right? Gino Auriemma, same thing. Diana Taurasi, same thing. We focus so much on the fact that there are people who are providing constructive criticism, not just people. We're talking about legends in the game. Like, we're talking about people who have been doing this for a while. Cheryl Swoops, Diana Taurasi, Gino Auriemma, and so many others who were just told that simple commentary that they made as constructive criticism was automatically deemed hateful or racist or jealousy. And so if you actually sit down and you dissect a lot of the things that people are citing as hate, whether it's from Cheryl or Gino or Diana or whoever, and you looked at it objectively, it's not hate. It's not jealousy. It's constructive criticism, which comes in all walks of life. I get constructive criticism all the time at work. I'm sure Martin does as well. I'm sure all of you guys who work do. Like, it's a part of life. So again, Caitlyn's definitely experiencing these things. The difference is it's not in our face to see it, right? It's not as out in the open as all this other stuff is. Nobody that I've seen, Martin, maybe you have, I haven't seen anyone go into Caitlin Clark's comments and wish death upon her for a hard foul. I haven't seen it. I don't
think that's been the, I'd like, maybe she has, and I don't see, because I don't really look, but yeah. I don't think there's any way to like specifically gauge who's getting more hate comments unless you just physically go and look. But I think it's pretty obvious who the main targets are here and who the main victims have been. Like, I acknowledge that Caitlyn has definitely been getting probably crazy comments, just like any high level athlete does. But I'm sorry, like, I don't think it's close. And I think when you look at the players who are speaking out about it, I mean, You don't see Caitlyn speaking out about it and saying like she's getting this influx of overwhelming hate. Like I'm pretty sure Caitlyn's getting more love than hate for the most part out here. Like I'm and I love Caitlyn. I love her as a player. I wish she was still playing. I wish that we could want to see her play more. It sucks that people are too exhausted by all this extra stuff that they feel like they have to celebrate the Indiana Fever getting knocked out of the playoffs. I wasn't happy either way. I want to see Caitlin Clark keep playing basketball just like anybody else should. But it's you can't avoid it at this point. Like it's been for different players, for players to be sharing the kind of things that are happening and that they're noticing, even players on her own team. And the last thing I'll say, you know, they've got to make sure that, listen, Caitlin Clark wants to win championships. Over like 70% of the women in the league are black, and most of the best players in the league are black. She's going to need black players to feel comfortable playing with her going forward, because they can't just whitewash the team and make it another Iowa just to make her comfortable, because she ain't going to win that way. And I know that's not what she wants. So I'll finish with that, in that whatever the team or she can do or whatever, they better make sure that it's a comfortable environment for black players. Otherwise, all these Caitlyn fans are going to be real upset too, because she's not going to win a thing.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say is, believe me, and I know I can speak for Martin on this, if we were hearing about these instances of Caitlin Clark more consistently and it was more demonstrative and in your face, we would be spending time on the show talking about it, and other people would as well. This isn't a Caitlin Clark smear campaign. Do believe me. Let's switch gears from that, and let's talk about two surprising things that happened this week, unrelated to the playoffs. The Chicago Sky fired head coach Teresa Witherspoon less than a year less than a year removed from hiring her to be the head coach of the team. And Kurt Miller, after 2 years in LA, has also been fired. I don't want to pit the two against each other, Martin, but which one would you say was a more surprising fire?
Oh, there's no question which one it is. I mean, Spoon is shocking. Everyone is shocked about that, right? I mean, I think she wasn't the perfect coach. There were things that I wasn't crazy about watching them play. I thought offensively they were missing something. She's a defensive coach. She's old school. She's grit and grind. She's hard-nosed. But that kind of identity it seemed to be so perfect for that team. For Angel Reese in particular, your star player, who anyone knows was going to be devastated when you let this woman go. That alone, the audacity to let this woman go when you know what she is to your star player, that speaks volumes to the ineptitude, the dysfunction. I mean, people are going in on the Chicago Sky on the internet today, because no matter what you think of Teresa Witherspoon, the locker room dynamics, the personality dynamics, the Angel Reese dynamic, this is who these players wanted to play for. And there are certain details that are interesting. I mean, they hired the GM after her, so clearly she wasn't a hire of his. There's clearly some pecking order where I guess some people have said that she wasn't easy to work with, which I can believe, because Teaspoon is hard-nosed. She is the way she is. Mm-hmm. But man, to do it that way, to do it now, again, when it seemed like she was the coach for that group, that's totally shocking.
Here's something that I found interesting to me. So the Chicago Sky released a statement, obviously addressing the firing. And in the second paragraph, I guess, it says, "We remain steadfastly committed to being a playoff and championship contender every year, and we will be embarking on a thorough search for our next head coach." That might be the biggest piece of poo I've ever heard.
That's just your typical PR statement.
It is. But here's
the
thing. When I think about this Chicago Sky team, and this is something I've been saying to people all year long, especially those who've been trying to compare the Sky to the Fever, we're talking about in year one of a rebuild, coming off of an offseason where you traded away your best player, coming into an offseason where you didn't really have much draft capital, but you somehow were able to have 2 top 8 picks, in which you drafted Kamilla Cardoso, who, if she played a full season, would have probably had a much stronger case for Rookie of the Year potentially. Angel Reese, who was in the Rookie of the Year race, whether you like it or not, for a considerable part of the season before Caitlin really started to pull away. You talking about a basketball team who, before Angel's injury, before Kennedy Carter had COVID, they were in the 8th seed. And even without those two players and Kamilla, who I think got shut down maybe 2 or 3 games before the end of the season, they still had a chance to make the playoffs on the last night of the season. So when we talk about, as a lot of people have talked about on Twitter, like grace and opportunity and a window to actually make a difference, what more could you have asked for Teresa Witherspoon in year 1 in Chicago, considering what she walked into and looking at how they ended? Like, what more could she have done? She first of all, she spoke Kennedy Carter's language, spoke life into Kennedy Carter, and contributed to what was, I would probably say, is the best season of Kennedy Carter's career. She spoke life into Angel Reese, spoke Angel Reese's language, and empowered Angel Reese to go out there every single night and be the best basketball player that she could be. What more can you ask from a head coach in year 1 of a rebuild than to be in the running on the last night of the regular season to make the playoffs? I don't know what more could have been done. And so, to reference Markeisha Grant real quick, who shouted out on Twitter, and you quoted it from our page, if Spoon wasn't the person, like, who does Chicago think is going to be able to coach Kamilla Cardoso and Angel Reese and Kennedy and Michaela and Diamond like Teaspoon? Who? What former player or what, not currently employed coach can you call and say, hey, we think you can do this job better than Teaspoon? Who is that person?
You know what it makes me think of, bro? It makes me think that they are treating her like Mark Jackson and they want their Steve Kerr. Someone over there doesn't want a motivational speaker. They don't want someone speaking. They want someone who's going to get them 85 points a game, drawing up magic. They want an offensive guru. It almost makes you think of what Phoenix did, bringing in someone from the outside in, an NBA guy. Like it's like, I feel like, and there's no way to even predict ownership in Chicago. I mean, between the players they've lost, the personnel they've been going through, like, there's no way to really gauge. That's why I said that statement, like, who cares? One in, out the other. They're just going to say what they say. There's no way to actually know what they actually think they're doing, and if they even know what they're doing. But to me, the only thing I'm looking at, and I'm not trying to justify it or say that I even agree with it, but the side where I look at, like, because again, I saw some deficiencies when I would watch Chicago just offensively. I felt like they needed a little more of an identity, and maybe someone, again, this is just speculation, maybe someone wanted to see a little more out of an Angel Reese, for instance, who we know has offensive limitations and struggles. Just her first year, their first year in the team as a rebuild. That's why this stuff just really doesn't end up making sense. But again, that's who Spoon is. And not to say players weren't going to get better going forward. Of course they were. But I just think, just bottom line, and maybe it's my bias, it's where I think the game is right now in general, but I think they're looking for a more offensive mind. I think they're looking for someone who might focus more on, like, the skill development of Angel Reese as opposed to, like, speaking life into her, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. But when you have a player like Angel Reese who's been through what she's been through, making sure that she can go out there every night and play confident basketball, I would say, should be a priority. I totally agree.
Mike Hughes said they should go get Kim Mulkey. Mike Hughes said they might as well just grab Mulkey. Like, Jesus, man. I mean,
could you imagine Kim Mulkey?
Could you imagine?
I do want to say this, and this is something else that I'm just always looking across leagues and figuring out comparisons. There's another coach currently, obviously not in her first year, but there's another coach who's in a similar situation. That's Latricia Trammell in Dallas. Mm-hmm. They didn't have Satu Sabali for the entire first part of the season, right? Satu comes back. They start putting some stuff together. They too, before they got eliminated, maybe a week and a half before the season, they had a chance. She's not fired. So that shows you,
right, or Tanisha wrong, depending on who you talk to.
People talk about Tanisha Wright as well, and how there's some things going on in Atlanta with the talent that they have, how things. So it's interesting to me. You have instances. Hey, I said it to you offline, and I think I might have even mentioned it on the show. In Washington, like, and Mystics fans even have questions about whether or not Eric Tebow is the guy for the job.
They overachieved, though. You can't look
but
at
they
that.
overachieved, right? So you have all these instances where you, at least 3 instances where you look across the league and they're kind of similar situations, and you're like, well, maybe those guys should maybe have a question mark. Or in similar situations, they were still given another chance. Why isn't Teresa Witherspoon being given another chance? Again, when you walk into a situation that she walked into and you literally turn lemons into lemonade, and the Chicago Sky have a chance to make the playoffs as the 8th seed in this season, that to me warrants another lap around the block. That to me warrants a second year. That to me warrants a chance to make sure that Angel is healthy and ready for next season, make sure that Kamilla is healthy and ready for next season, make sure we're continuing to fill out this roster, because that is a basketball team under Coach Spoon who could have made a lot of noise next season, where we're not needing to wait to the last Thursday of the regular season to punch our ticket to the playoffs. We have that locked in maybe with a month or 2 weeks to go. So lots of questions.
Yeah, and I mean, Kurt Miller, again, isn't as surprising because the release from them said they mutually parted ways. So that's a different situation entirely. He had great things to say. Him and Dearica Hamby had a nice exchange. I love that he, supported her and had great things to say about her. But I haven't been crazy about Kurt Miller as a coach, honestly. I think he's proven and he's solid.
Sure.
But I just honestly, even just looking at how he handled Rickea Jackson this season, I don't think it was egregious, but I would have loved to just see her activated more. And I don't want to put that total blame on him, but I think Kurt Miller is a fine coach, but I wouldn't have thought he would be the one to take them to the promised land either.
Sure.
And I'm interested to see what names. I've seen Katie Smith's name floating out there possibly for LA. People have been talking about Spoon in LA. I don't think that's where they're going. They probably have their sights set on somebody. I saw Katie Smith out there, but it's going to be interesting what crop of coaches are about to, because it feels like, again, in Phoenix, they brought in an outsider. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how the coaching carousel starts to develop in the W.
Real thing before we get into the semifinal matchups that start on Sunday, do you think either of these two are going to find another coaching job in the league?
Yes, I do. People have brought up Spoon in Atlanta if Tanisha Wright were to get out of there. I do. I think both of them. I wonder if they would want to be assistants or if they'd have to be head coaches. I don't know if that's a deal breaker for them, but I could see them on the staff. Teaspoon, I wonder what's going to happen with her. I feel like some people are going to be calling her, maybe the NBA. I mean, she was with the Pelicans, maybe like, bro, people are going to be calling Teaspoon for sure. And I would say Kurt Miller too. Yeah.
Well, let's get into our semifinal matchups. The first of which is a rematch of last year's WNBA Finals. The New York Liberty host the Las Vegas Aces on Sunday in Brooklyn. There's a lot to talk about. We've obviously seen this matchup before, but this one I feel is slightly different for a number of reasons, right? Sabrina is obviously a better player this year compared to last year. The Aces have added a little bit more firepower off the bench, namely Tiffany Hayes, who was this year's 6th player of the year. When you're looking at this matchup for the second time around, what to you needs to be the difference for the Liberty to get it done?
It's the same thing. It's the guard play. It's the guards. I'm still watching for what the guards are doing in this series. It's the big spotlight is on Sabrina Ionescu. She had a major season. She is a totally different player now.
Oh, yeah.
And I look forward to seeing what that player does in this series, because you need to match what the Aces guards are going to be doing scoring and playmaking wise. Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, and Kelsey Plum just do so much before you even get to start talking about Asia Wilson. And then now they have Tiffany Hayes. Alicia Clark does a little bit of everything. Hayes and Clark are really my two X factors for them, but it's the guard play, man, for the Liberty. Fibich has been, I think, a revelation for them. She's been a revelation, and she's not the new Maureen Johannes, because no one's Maureen Johannes.
No one.
She kind of replaced her just on the roster, But just what she does, I mean, she is a revelation at 6'3", 6'4", long arms, can hit shots, can make plays. She's a different option than Courtney Vandersloot, who's shorter and older. And defensively, the Liberty guards, that was the big test for them in the finals last year against Vegas, was mainly defensively, but also, offensively, they got to produce too. So the first thing I'm really looking at is just the guard play. I want to see how active, how aggressive, how poised Sabrina is now compared to how we saw her struggle against, Connecticut and Vegas last year in the playoffs. I want to see how the new Sabrina looks and how she can dictate things from the perimeter. I think it really starts there for me.
You know me, man. This is a tough one for me as a fan of the team. It's tough for me to watch this. And as Kelsey Plum said, this is going to be a war. I have my eyes on two of those Vegas guards, Chelsea Gray and Jackie Young. Chelsea Gray, we saw in the first round. She's, again, just ever so slow. I think we're starting to see it. I think we're starting to get back to 2022 playoff Chelsea Gray for sure. I expect all of that and then some in this series. But we all know who I'm also looking for. We're looking for Jackie Young, right? Jackie Young, when you and I talked at the end of the finals last year, or at the end of game one last year, I told you that if Jackie Young kept up the performance she gave us in game one last year, she could have been finals MVP if she played at that level. I'm still waiting to see that from Jackie Young. We've had some moments of the course of the season with Jackie where she's given us a little bit of it, but this overall has been relatively a down year considering the steady improvement that she's made over the past couple seasons. I'm fully expecting us and hoping that we can get the Jackie Young of 2023 or 2022, because that's going to be the difference. Because to your point, the guard play in New York has gotten better compared to the last time these two teams played each other. And the proof is in the pudding. In the 3 games that the Aces played against Liberty this season, they lost all of them. They did not beat the Liberty one time in 3 attempts. And although
that's not good for the Liberty.
And you're right.
Not good for the Liberty. I'm sorry. Right. You can say that's a good sign, but I'm a basketball player. Trust me. I know that's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign at all, 100%. But I mean, I watched Leone Fibic come out there, her first playoff game in her career. She dropped 21 points, hit all 4 shots from the field, only missed one, or hit all 4 shots from 3, only missed 1 shot from the field, finished 7 of 8, and she was the difference maker for them. If she continues to do that, along with what we know that we've seen Sabrina Ionescu do this season, I mean, we're talking about a scenario where one of the things that we loved so much about the Aces is the versatility at the guard play, because it took some pressure off of A'ja Wilson. And it seems like so far this season, because of the elevation of Sabrina Ionescu, that's taken the pressure off of Stewie to have to not go out there every night and do these backpack jobs. And when Stewie's not when she's not backpacking, and when you're being forced as a defense to just play her straight up one-on-one, that's not a good sign. Now, I have no doubt in A'ja Wilson's ability to handle Breanna Stewart one-on-one. Why would I? But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you can go toe-to-toe. As you mentioned in a clip earlier about the Lynx, which we'll get into in a second, we're talking about all-time great shot makers in Breanna Stewart and A'ja Wilson. Those around them, specifically the guards, like you say all the time, they have to step up. So I'm looking for Chelsea Gray. I'm looking for Jackie Young, 100%.
Yeah, that's the thing, that it's just the thing about Vegas, man. Like, and you look, Jackie Young, yes, but that's the thing. It's not it. That's why the Aces are so dangerous. You can have a Chelsea Gray game. You can have a Kelsey Plum game. You have a Jackie Young game. Like, each of their guards can take over a game.
Yeah.
The Liberty still can't say that necessarily.
That's a great point.
My big X factor for the Liberty is Benijah Laney Hamilton by far, because of what she has to do defensively. I'm sure they're going to go to Kayla Thornton a little bit in this round as opposed to the last round. Because defensively, they're going to need to try to get at least 1 or 2 of Vegas's guards slowed down and a little uncomfortable and just contained. But the Liberty guards, as I said, Fibic is going to be offensively. Fibic, I think, is going to be the key. I think even Courtney Vandersloot, because I think she's struggled a little bit, just, a little bit of age, slowing down a little bit. We really saw her struggle last year. But even in the games coming off the bench now with Fibic as the, solidified starter, I think pressure is off Sloot a little bit, and she's playing a little more free, a little less tense, and I think that's going to help her and obviously help the Liberty as a result. So the depth could be interesting. The Liberty have different guards that can do different things in terms of the sum of their guard parts, none as explosive as what Vegas has, but they are better. Phoebich is a new element. You still have Benigel Hamilton. And the Liberty, they can go to their depth a little bit sometimes. They have different looks. So I think they have what it takes to make this an even more interesting series. I think I'm still leaning towards Vegas because they're just hitting that stride where they know how to win games. Even though I said it's not a good sign, it's not good because I just know Vegas has in their minds that the Liberty beat them every time this year. And it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row. It's even hard to beat a team, 4 times in a row. That just shows you're just flat out better than that team. So Vegas is literally headhunting, to prove to the Liberty and everybody, no, guess what? You're still not better than us. Yep. And I'm pretty sure they're going to come out and prove that. I think it's going to be another phenomenal series. It should be the WNBA finals. That to hell with this format. But, these are to me, these are the 2 best teams, and they're going to show that.
For what it's worth, if I'm not mistaken, the first 2 times these 2 teams met in the regular season, Chelsea Gray hadn't returned from injury yet. And the 3rd time they met in New York, Asia Wilson was in a walking boot, and I was crying on Protect Our Queens. So this is a very different matchup all around. From this rematch to another rematch from last year's first round, we're going to talk Lynx and Sun on the other side of this clip from our guy, Chaz Franklin.
Breakout player of the year. This is Marina Mabry, 3-level scorer. She can be a person that can carry an offense. If you just quote unquote reduce her to being a spot up shooter, on her worst day, she's a 40% 3-point shooter. Gifted passer. She doesn't play the playmakers much here in the W, but there's certain passes that she can make that I haven't seen anyone make. Workaholic. You have to make her leave the gym because she'll live in there. And a good kid that gets a bad rap because of her competitive spirit.
Man, that take age like fine wine.
Yeah.
And obviously that was way before we knew she'd end up on Connecticut.
Right. Way before. That was, I think, before the season started, actually, when you said that. Protect Our Queens. I love Protect Our Queens prophecy coming true. For what it's worth, Marina Mabry so far, she's averaging in this through 2 games, 22 points, 4.5 assists, 39.5% from the field, 36% from 3. She has turned into a spot-up shooter in Connecticut, and she is making teams pay. How important is it for Marina Mabry to continue that against a very versatile defense in Minnesota?
I mean, that's what makes Connecticut different. That's why I said before, she adds an element of offense and shot making that I felt like Connecticut had always been missing. Dynamic shot making, and not just it's not just catch and shoot. She's off the dribble, baby. They've got some great sets where they got her coming off tight ball screens, mid range, coming straight off that tight curl, and she'll if you're not there on the hedge, if you're not showing hard, she lets that thing go tight off the curl. She is what Chaz said she would be this season. And not to mention, bro, she broke the record for points off the bench in a playoff game in the first game against Indiana with 27. So she got right to it. She's a flat out scorer. She fits right in with Connecticut too, with her just competitive spirit. Playing with DJNA is feeding families. People are loving that. Absolutely. Just the attitude and the aggressiveness of that team. She just fits right in. How important is it? Bro, come on. Everybody's got to be at their best. What are we talking about? Everything's important. Everyone's got to play well. We know this. Come on. It's important. Everyone's got to play well. What am I going to say? It's not that important. She doesn't have to play that well.
Silly question from Dwayne Marcus. You're right. I'm sorry. I will say this, though. I have been thoroughly impressed with Marina Mabry. She's hit big shot after big shot after big shot in 2 games that I will admit were a lot closer than I expected them to be. I am not afraid to admit that. I didn't expect the Sun to necessarily dog walk the Fever necessarily, but I didn't expect the games to be as tight as they were down the stretch. But when the lights got bright, she showed up and she hit some big shots for the Sun. On the Minnesota side of things, and this goes back to a clip that we posted earlier on the page of you, kind of talking about their versatility and their defense and their ability to more specifically go blow for blow down the stretch when they need a big play. Nafisa Collier, bro, 38 points in game 1, 42 points in game 2, tying the WNBA playoff single game record, 80 points in 2 playoff games. That's never been done before in the history of the league. Nafisa Collier and Alyssa Thomas, 2 of the best in the business. What are you looking for in that head-to-head matchup? Because it's always great, not only when you get to see 2 great teams go head-to-head, but it's even greater when you get to see 2 great players go head to head, and they just so happen to play the exact same position. What are you looking for most out of that matchup?
Yeah, well, this is what's fascinating about this, Marcus, because I don't think what you just said about when we know her stats, Nafisa Collier is playing the best basketball of anyone in the playoffs so far through the first couple games. Her stats are ridiculous. She put up 40 balls. Phoenix is not Connecticut.
You're right.
and Indiana is not Minnesota. So both of these teams, you know, and they're going to be ready, but they're coming up against defenses that are way better than what they just faced. I mean, the first game against Phoenix, bro, Minnesota, I mean, Phoenix was in a zone, a 3-2 zone or something. Minnesota was shooting open shots the whole first half. I'm like, what is going on here? Wide open jump shots off like one pass, wide open. I was like, wait, are they like, do they not want to win or something? Like it was crazy. So now you have two teams. Like now I think is where we're going to see it's either going to be, Marcus, like most of the game is going to be a battle of execution because these are two execution teams. Yes. So what I said about what my only question mark, and listen, I tweeted this, the more I watch Minnesota, the more I like them, the more I believe in them, the more I am seeing championship. It goes to what Lauren said. We had Lauren Mincy as a guest on the show a couple weeks ago. Yep. One thing that really stuck out to me that she said, which is just so true, and this is probably true across all sports, team sports, when you have players who like each other, that's probably one of the most unstoppable features of a great team is when everyone just likes each other. And you can tell Minnesota, they do the electric slide after win. They dance after games, like they like each other. Yeah. They're well coached. They got an all-time great coach, Cheryl Reeve. They're well coached. They play together. They play good basketball. They've got size. They've got scoring. They have everything. It's just the only thing when I watch them is what you brought up is like down the stretch. Now, again, I don't think those stats from Nafisa prove anything against what I said about yeah, they can score down the stretch, but it's their execution. Even if you're watching the games and how Nafisa scores, it's similar to Asia. It's very simple. Like it's not like they're giving her the ball, like get us a bucket. She can do that, but a lot of it is out of two-man game, pick and roll, offensive rebounds, good cutting, right? She's just a great basketball player, great awareness, knows where to be, runs the floor, good hands, good and having those things can help you get 40 if you're inclined to like go after it and score. Like most of her points are layups. Like it's not, if you watch her highlights, you're not seeing a whole lot of creative fancy stuff. It's good movement, good cutting, a lot of layups, shooting the shot when she's open. Like it's not anything too crazy. So I still think this is going to be mostly games in a series of execution, great cutting on both sides, great defense on both sides. So now I think we're going to see the battle of, okay, down the stretch, it's tight. The defense is tight. Connecticut, you're not just going to beat them on a back door in the last 2 minutes of the game. You're not going to get a wide open Marina Mabry shot on bad transition defense from the other team in this series. Connecticut is going to be tightened up in those last 2 minutes. So now for both sides, Connecticut and Minnesota, who are you going to get a bucket? And not that it just comes down to that, but that for Minnesota, that's been a question mark for me. Like, are they able to make stuff happen off the bounce? I love the collection of their parts. They've got a high level shooter, Kayla McBride. Richard Carlton is hitting big shots. Alana Smith is making plays as a big girl. I mean, passing, shooting, versatility, Courtney Williams, like it's all there. It's just, I'm watching them even at their best. When I watch, I'm watching certain possessions and I'm like, okay, who does it go to now on the perimeter, or who does it go to? If we can't get our first action or a second action, if it's not there, who can create something out of nothing? I think Connecticut has a little bit more of that. I'm still favoring Minnesota, but that's just my one question mark that I still think is going to be addressed in this series.
Martin, there was a player that I went and I saw with my own two eyes for the first time, and I texted you in awe. Do you remember who that was?
This season?
Yeah, this season.
Was it at a Mystics game where you covered?
Yeah. I saw her with my own two eyes for the first time, and I was in awe.
Was it Alyssa Thomas?
No. I compared her to Chris Paul, the Chris Paul 2021 finals run.
Oh, Courtney Williams.
Courtney Williams, that's right.
This
is a series, I think, that hinges on the continued efficiency and effectiveness of Courtney Williams for all the reasons you just mentioned, right? When you look at Vegas, What we know is when the going gets tough and you need a play to be made, whether it's a shot or a great pass, Chelsea Gray going to give it to you, right? We know the same to be true for Alyssa Thomas in Connecticut. We expect the same to be true from Sabrina based on what we've seen so far this season, but I think the jury is still out on that. We know who Courtney Williams is as a basketball player, not just as a shot maker, but as a facilitator, the IQ, the vision, putting the ball where it needs to be and not where the player is in that moment. All of those things, that's going to be important. I think the great thing about this matchup is I think these two teams play very similar styles of basketball, right? You have two very rugged defenses. If I'm not mistaken, both of these defenses were top 5 in like all the major categories, right? And you have two forwards who, if they need to get a bucket at any point in time, whether it's a simple bucket or a creative bucket, whatever it is, they can give it to you in Nafisa Collier and Alyssa Thomas. I'm expecting Courtney Williams to tap into that mode and facilitate this offense the way it needs to be facilitated so that despite how tight the Connecticut defense is, the Minnesota offense can still do what it needs to do. On the other side in Connecticut, DeWanna Bonner, like this, I think has to be the DeWanna Bonner series. And it's kind of interesting to say that because DeWanna Bonner, I think universally acknowledged as probably the second best player on the team. And I even told you one point in time this season that she was like the best player of the team because Alyssa Thomas had kind of gotten out of the gate slow. But what we know about DeWanna Bonner, she's a little bit streaky. Yeah. If she starts off cold, it takes her a while to get going. But if she starts off hot, she's hot. But more importantly, and we saw this with her when she was the primary defender against Caitlin Clark, she's a really good defender, and she uses all of her frame to her advantage defensively. If there's one thing that I've talked about a lot for Minnesota, it's how they can cause a lot of teams fits because of their length and their versatility. I don't think they have a single player in the starting lineup under 6'3" or 6'2" or something.
Courtney Williams is probably
six.
I don't know.
But she's still a really good defender, though she makes up for with her defensive prowess. So DeWanna Bonner has to use that length to her advantage, no matter who she's matched up against. And I think we saw, and we kind of already knew this, but I think we saw, especially in the Fever series, that you can put her on anybody, which is going to have to come into effect because anyone in Minnesota can guard anyone in Connecticut, I think, just based on the length and the versatility. So not so much offensively, because I do know that DeWanna Bonner is going to get hers, whether it's efficient or inefficient, but defensively, more importantly, DeWanna Bonner, to me, is an X factor on the defensive side of the ball. When Connecticut needs a stop, she has to be able to go out there and get that stop if it's going to result in not just a win on a game-to-game basis, but Connecticut punching their ticket to the WNBA Finals this season.
Yeah, there are similarities on both sides, and I think the Kayla McBride Marina Mabry matchup is going to be pretty huge. I think in a couple games, I think there will be a game or two where you see whoever gets hotter on those two sides for their whichever shooting guard gets hotter, that team is going to have the advantage. I think that's going to be a huge matchup. I like how you mentioned Alyssa Thomas and Nafisa's matchup because that is going to be huge. AT not as much of like go get a bucket as Nafisa is.
Sure.
But I do think there's going to be, I think for the most part, it's going to be a battle of attrition. And then we are going to see in those moments, like who can tough it out, who can get a bucket. As we're talking, I think I'm more leaning to Connecticut now. I'm starting to feel like we're going to get a Vegas Connecticut finals.
A rematch.
I'll be good. Listen, any combination of finals, I think I'm good with.
It'll be the two best teams no matter who it is, which is what you love in these scenarios.
Yeah, no, I think we're listen, these games are going to be going forward. Every game is going to be killer. Whatever the finals is going to be awesome. I think that all teams are deserving, but I don't know. I'm leaning towards I think Connecticut has a lot of momentum coming in. But I mean, Minnesota's really unique. I think Connecticut's experience we might see a little of their experience play out too, because I think more of their players have been here before at this level, understand the moment a little bit more, right? But Minnesota, again, they like each other. They know who they are. They know who their best player is. Very skilled across the board. Like no weak links, no drop offs, no like she can't shoot or can't, like that. That's what makes them so interesting. So I think Connecticut has a little more of that challenge defensively because I think Minnesota has a little more firepower offensively. But they're both so good defensively. I really think it's mostly going to be like a battle of attrition. I suspect we're going to see like more low scoring games in that series, even though both teams can score. I think Connecticut's going to be really focused on taking away the easy stuff from Minnesota. And yeah, I think who can get hot, who's hitting shots, that shooting guard matchup, I think is going to be huge, because whoever's getting buckets in the end, man, that's who's going to get the edge. I really look forward to seeing who steps out of there, because that you're going to come out of there tested. Whoever wins that series is going to come out having felt that series, right?
Literally, literally having felt it. Yeah, I mean, you're right. So we got to do it. We got to put ourselves on the spot here. I got to make a prediction. I think you've already made yours, but we've got 2 rematches on either side, both from playoffs of last year. We've got the Liberty and the Aces, a rematch of the finals. We've got the Lynx and the Sun, a rematch of the first round. Martin Sories, when it's all said and done, who do you have competing for this year's WNBA championship?
Yeah, I just said I think it's Vegas. It's gonna be Vegas, Connecticut. I think so. And you already made yours. So do we have the clip? Are we running the clip? Because you did yours. You said your pick.
I did. I said it was Liberty and Lynx. We're gonna run the clip, but yeah, let's run the clip. Martin and I have talked about this. From a matchup standpoint, the Lynx are going to cause a lot of teams a lot of issues in the postseason.
Yeah, I don't want to see the Lynx
and their versatility. This season is telling me that when the Liberty and the Lynx match up, the Lynx are going to win 75% of the time, according to the 4 games they played. So I'm going to say the Lynx are going to get it done, and I'm going to give Nafisa Collier Finals MVP. I guess for journalistic integrity, I have to stand by that of Liberty. And it's a great pick, and I still think it's very possible. But do know, if you don't know, I will be rooting for the Las Vegas Aces to make it back to the finals. But for the purposes of journalistic integrity, I will stand by my pick of Liberty and Lynx. Well, folks, it's been a great episode of Protect Our Queens once again. If you are not already, please make sure that you're subscribed to the Give Us a Shot Network so you don't miss any future episodes. Make sure you tap in with us on Instagram at ProtectOurQueens_. Also, make sure you tap in with us on Twitter at POQueens_ as well. As we kind of mentioned at the top of the show, I will be cruising next week, so I won't be here. There won't be a show next week. We'll be back the week after. As it stands right now, we will stick with our Tuesday date. However, if there is a Game 5 in either of these series, those games will be played on that Tuesday. And if that is the case, we will have a show at a later date so we can do a full WNBA Finals preview for you guys. So just make sure you're tapped in with us throughout the course of the next couple of weeks so you can stay tuned on when exactly that show is going to happen once I return from my various destinations. In the mean and in between time, again, follow us, like, subscribe, comment. As always, don't be afraid to interact with us. We love to interact with you, and we love to have you guys' input at all times. So for my guy, Martin Sories of Basketball Society, this is Marcus of the Protect Our Queens podcast signing off. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, you guys enjoy yourselves some women's basketball.